I wanted to just give a few examples of some of the cost principles that we were talking about, or the smart business decision principles that we were just reading about. The first one is economies of scale. I had the opportunity to procure cell phones, approximately 3,000 of them at one time. And it was drastically different experience with the cell phone providers than when I just walk in there by myself and I'm like, hey, I want a cell phone, and they're like, okay, here's the terms and conditions, sign it. There was no concept or ability to negotiate or do that sort of thing. But when I'm representing 3,000 cell phones, there was a drastic difference. Representatives from all of the major cell phone carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, a few others, those were the main ones in San Diego at that point in time, were flying out to meet me. They were willing to negotiate. They were throwing in some free extras like free car chargers and things like that. And I actually found myself at one point driving around in a van monitoring reception on the particular military base where I was working. So that's an example of how, as an individual buyer, you're kind of stuck with whatever the company is offering, but when you are representing a large chunk of money, then the reality is you actually have a much more leverage with the company. Another example, this one is to illustrate spend analysis. I'm a huge drinker of Coke Zero, and if you ever come to any of my classes, I'm usually chugging it down. And after a while, students ask me what I'm drinking, and it's Coke Zero, which isn't the best beverage for you. But it all started with a can of Coke. I was drinking like a can of Coke in the afternoon, and then it turned into a can in the morning and a can in the afternoon, and then it turned into a can in the morning, can at lunch, and can in the afternoon, and then it turned into those 20-ounce bottles, 2 of those a day, and then 3 of those a day, then 4 of those a day. And then it all went downhill when the vending machine decided to start charging $1.20 for one of those 20-ounce bottles. And that's essentially when my spend analysis kicked in, because I thought to myself, well, this is outrageous. He's going to have extra 20 cents every time they want a Coke. I always made sure I had lots of dollar bills. But then I thought, well, I can buy a jug and 2-liter bottles, and at 2 cents an ounce, which is about the price in a 2-liter bottle, I can have a much better deal. So I went ahead and decided to buy the 2-quart size, or the 2-liter size, whatever they are, of Cokes in the larger bottles, and then I would fill up my jug. And of course, I ended up drinking a lot more, so that wasn't the most prudent decision. But that's an example of how economies of scale, economies of scale apply to that, but also spend analysis. I was monitoring my spending. I decided spending $1 per bottle of Coke when I could spend $1 for a 2-liter bottle of Coke. Just made a lot more sense. We read about this in business all the time. It's always the classic example is, hey, if you gave up your $5 Starbucks double mocha latte or whatever they are, and instead went down to 7-Eleven and had the 49-cent cup of coffee, and then you invested the difference, you could retire on a millionaire. Of course I'm exaggerating, but that's the standard example. And spend analysis on the governmental level makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, many of us don't apply spend analysis principles to our private lives, but and that's because we're probably not buying as many things. But on the government, if you took a look at, hey, what is everything being spent on, and maybe we can consolidate things, and then because we've consolidated, for instance, the cell phones as an example, that allows us to take advantage of economies of scale. And as a final note to the cell phones, that's exactly how I ended up procuring what was actually between 3,000 to 5,000 cell phones on a contract. It was because they had been being bought one-off by credit cards, and there was an audit, and the audit came in and said, well, you would be a whole lot better off if you consolidated all of these cell phones into one contract. And I can attest that was definitely the case. We really got a great deal with 3,000 to 5,000 cell phones. The last thing I want to illustrate is administrative costs, and that's the concept of it. It takes your time and your money to buy something, and you want to make sure that your time and your money doesn't outweigh the benefit of whatever it is that you might be saving. An example to illustrate this, I recently bought an outfit on sale from Talbots, and unfortunately when UPS came to deliver it, they didn't deliver it. They said the address was marked wrong, and so then I had to take time off of work, because the only time they were open was during the times that I'm normally at work, had to take time off of work, drive down almost to Tijuana to this main facility to pick up this package, and I ended up somehow on a toll road that cost $5 for each way. So I ended up, well, and I had to get off and on because I got lost at one point, so I ended up paying like $15 on the toll road. And at my hourly rate, by the time everything was said and done, I ended up spending as much just to pick up the package as the entire outfit had cost. Well, I was kind of irritated about that because that's an example of how the costs associated with that ended up being as much as the outfit itself. And so that, it just is to illustrate that administrative costs or ancillary costs always should be taken into account whenever you're making any kind of procurement decision. For instance, buying online might be faster and cheaper overall, but then if you end up paying shipping, it might be just as fast to head down to the store and buy the same thing but without the shipping costs. So those are just a couple of things to consider in these smart business decisions.